What's going on, guys? We're going to get started with our Summary of Markets Week 49. Then we're going to get into our options and watch list after that. Let's get started with SPY. So SPY was pretty bullish last week. You had a small distribution, but it was slightly bullish with that uptrend. You saw a break of that uptrend down to the OTS trail. The trail actually ended up giving you a buy signal, and then we pushed back above that trend, giving you that kind of buy trigger. Then you saw Thursday and Friday were actually very bullish. You hit our first breakout targets, almost hit our second breakout targets. So those will be the targets moving forward, 381, 382. And then you will see a final target of 387 as long as you stay above this little trend line here. 378 would be the kind of bearish trigger if you do get below that. Right now, the momentum looks extremely bullish. Down in the Momo, you can see the trend is still bullish. The short term is still bullish. So it looks like we should continue higher into that 387. Just keep an eye on that 378 as your bearish trigger. Moving on to gold, we talked about how you were breaking this little downtrend that we were seeing. You were getting very close to breaking it with that doji. I said even if it pulled back to the 50 moving average, you were very likely going to go higher. And we did gap up above this trend, pushed higher. You hit that pivot target, but then look at what we did. We failed that pivot just as we did last time with basically the same momentum. You saw the pivot give you a massive sell-off the first time, and now we had a massive sell-off the second time as well. So we're back into that bearish channel, coming back into support kind of around 1800. As long as 1800 holds, this could continue higher, but it looks like right now it is getting a lot of sell pressure. So you might not hold that support. So don't predict that you will hold that support and try to buy it because you could blow right through it. So wait to see a little bit of confirmation. If you find support down here, you could push higher, but it doesn't look too good so far. Obviously, with the stimulus news coming out, with the Democrats taking control of the Senate, the House, and they have the presidency now when he gets inaugurated in a few weeks, they should be able to push forward with their stimulus plans. So if that does get pushed forward, you should see gold and silver pushing higher with the decrease in the dollar. Okay, so just be on the lookout for the news. If the stimulus gets passed, you should, it doesn't have to, but you should see buy pressure come in on gold and silver. Moving on to oil, I told you guys as long as it stayed above 46 and a quarter, 48, you were going to get some buy pressure into that 52.60 level. You can see that it's exactly what happened. We stayed above the support, pushed higher. You hit our first target. 54.10 would be the next target, and you would be looking for a $60 breakout if you were able to stay above this pivot. Right now, you are still not getting very much momentum. The trend is still very strong. The momentum is still slightly bullish. But you do have that bear div playing out. Not a whole lot of momentum coming in on this breakout. So this could be a lot of resistance that sends you back down into 48. So pay attention to that. Moving on to Bitcoin, I told you guys that our final target was 35.3 because we were not able to extend that target with any consolidation last week. But that final target was hit. I told you guys before that that if you were going to pull back, you wanted to watch for 28.5 and 27.7 as your pullback support, and then look at where we bounced. If you guys bought that support, you bottom ticked it, and you got a beautiful fill on that pullback to trade that breakout. So with that pullback, you were able to see a massive 50% return off of that support. So beautiful breakout there. You pulled back to retest that 1618, and currently we are holding that level. Now, I did talk about this in Discord, but I did not talk about this on the Summary of Markets. But let's go ahead and show you. If you look at the 3-day VWAP, let's go ahead and turn this into a 1-month VWAP, which it currently is. Go down to a lower time frame. I talked about how in Discord we were seeing Bitcoin was outside that monthly VWAP. This is typically very unhealthy and very bearish, and it typically wants to consolidate or pull back to that monthly VWAP as support. Okay, so that's what we saw. We saw an unhealthy price, and then you pulled back, distributed, and now we pulled back to retest that monthly VWAP. Currently, that monthly VWAP is holding almost to the tick, so this is very bullish as long as you hold above, say, 35,000. Okay, so you can see that wick is being bought up. It could come back to retest it and kind of give you a little bit more of an accumulation, but so far right now, extremely bullish. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's get rid of that. Let's extend our fib. So let's take our most recent impulse, which we could grab these buy signals all the way up to this little distribution here. And this would give us our next impulse targets: 43.5, 45.5, 52.1, 54.4, and then 63 as the final target. These are obviously very far out, very extended. Some other targets I want to show you guys. Let me get rid of this real fast. Let's go to the weekly. If we take that same strategy using our weekly time frame, we can take the low all the way back in March to this little distribution here. And this would give us a final target of 46.6. Okay, so that would be like your weekly target. So you should see some resistance come in around that 46.6 target. Okay, let's go ahead and delete that. We'll go back to the daily. And then we will leave this as our main targets moving forward. Just understand that 46.6, which is somewhere just above the 618 target here, that will be some weekly resistance. Okay. Moving on to Ethereum, basically the same thing. You had a pullback to support, bounced off support, and then launched higher. You hit your final target, and we actually pushed through that final target. So we can go ahead, delete this. We're going to create a new fib off this most recent impulse. And now I would say if you stay above 1376, you should see 1600, and then 1800s, 1900s would be your next target. So keep an eye on these fibs. If you do pull back, 1075 all the way down to 937 should be some support. Okay, that is the summary of markets. Let's move on to the options watch list. So basically everything that we were watching last week, we are still watching this week. Just waiting on some more confirmation on these plays. Overstock, you did bounce out of support. You hit our first target around that anchored VWAP of 59. 59. Next target would be that 73 anchored VWAP. You're not able to stay above 59. So right now it's pretty bearish, pulling back into support. It might consolidate into earnings, but until you get back above 59, not a really strong play on that one. Peloton, I told you guys if it stayed above 149, very likely going to get 167 as your final target. So keep an eye on that 167 level. Big C, not really watching Big C anymore. You are retesting a resistance. You could take puts on this, but it is close to your 52-week low. So it would be a little scary to short this. But if it does get back above, say, 68, 71, it will start to look a lot more bullish. Moving on to PLTR, you are retesting that anchored VWAP around 26.5. You do want to stay above that 26.5, and then you would be targeting around $30 to 33. Massive distribution here. We can go ahead and delete this bullish pennant. That's no longer playing out. I told you guys that it would have support around 2250. That damn near was the bottom to the tick. So right now you are putting in almost a bulldog. So you have that curved back double bottom. Watch for that pop up. Maybe it pulls back to retest the anchored VWAP, and then you push higher into that 33. So keep an eye on that. Moving on to AMD, you're retesting resistance around 96 to 98. You would have to stay above 98 to look at 103, 105 as your targets. Moving on to NEO, I told you guys if it stayed above 49, 54 would be your next target. Stay above 54. You should hit all-time high, and then your next target would be $60. You did top out at 59.31, which is pretty much the $60 target. You did have very big news over the weekend with NEO. They are partnering up with NVIDIA. I'm not sure exactly what the partnership is. I didn't read too much into it, but they are partnering up with NVIDIA for some kind of software for their EV vehicles. Okay, so that should be very bullish for NEO. That should be very bullish for NVIDIA. I'll go over NVIDIA right after we give you some targets. Let me give you some targets first on NVIDIA, or excuse me, NEO. So for NEO, watch this most recent impulse. Now that $60 has hit, watch for 62 to 68 to see some resistance and give you a good target. Final target on that would be 76. Now let's move on to NVIDIA. NVIDIA has been consolidating for almost 2 months now. Very funny that it did this right into the news. You should see some momentum because there has been basically nothing pushing NVIDIA until this news. If it gets above 550 in pre-market or during the opening session, you should be able to rip higher into like 570 by the end of the week. So watch out for 570 to 585, 590. That would be your swing trade targets for maybe like 2 to 3 weeks out if you do see some buyers. But for the end of the week, if you wanted to take a kind of a lotto, that 570 to 575, if this does push above 550, that should be pretty easy. Let's go back to these. Chegg, I told you guys above 92, you should get 100. I did tell you around, I think 95 was short-term resistance, right around that high. We did break that high, so that target has been smashed. Keep an eye on 100, 103 as your next targets. Teladoc, I told you guys above 206, you should get 220. After that, you should get 230. Your final target would be 237. Pretty much all of those targets were smashed. You topped out on that 277 target almost to the tick. You front ran it by like 50 cents, but that pretty much hit your target. Nasty top doji right here, but as long as you stay above 220, the same targets would be in play, 230, 237, and then we would look for a breakout target probably around 250. Moving on to Starbucks, I told you guys above 100, above 101, you should get 107. There you go, you got 107. A little bit of resistance came in, and now we are kind of pulling back and going back into that 107. If you do break 107, 108, watch for 114, 115 as your breakout targets. Zillow, I told you guys above 132, 135, you should get 145, 148. There you go, your targets have been hit. Next target would be your final target at 160 if you do hold above 148. Square, I told you guys above 235, 237, you should get your final target at 247. That target has pretty much been hit. I'm going to go ahead and extend these targets. We're going to take this entire impulse to give us a more long-term, more of a swing trade target. So if you do stay above 250, watch 267, 273 as your swing trade targets. DraftKings, you are kind of putting in a nice little bottom here. This is being pushed around constantly by the New York news. New York is talking about enabling sports betting in their state, but then they talked about how it would be based on the state lottery or something like that, which they tried to do that in DC, I believe it was, and it did not go very well. So that news was bullish, and then it was bearish, and now we are kind of recovering a little bit. I'd say above 53, you could get 57. Above 57, you should be able to get 64. But that would be the only trade that I would look for. Penn is kind of the same thing. You pulled back to retest the trend line. I told you guys above 92, you would be able to get 101. You are still holding 92. As long as that holds, watch for that 101 target. 104 would be the farther target, okay? AI, I told you guys at 115 to 113, you should find a lot of support right around that gap fill. You bounced pretty much off that gap fill to the penny. So this gap way back here pretty much gave you the bottom. Massive bull div, played out, hit our targets around 137, 148. Now your final target would be around 183 if you were holding this very long term. Obviously, there's some targets in between that. If we do look at some pivots, go ahead and delete this. Let's see if we can find any pivots. There are no 1 hour pivots. Let's see 15 minute. Yeah, so 15 minute, you have a target around 163. You got to have one, or you have one around 155. You got a bunch of targets kind of in this area here. So from 155 all the way up to like 177, you're going to have little legs of resistance. The main target would be that top level around 180. NLS, we're not really watching anymore. It does look okay. If you do get above like 22, you probably could see a gap fill around 27, but that's not really on my radar right now. Nordstrom, I told you guys that it looked like it was going to break out up into like 34, 35. That's exactly what we did. That breakout is playing out. You could continue into 36 as long as momentum stays strong and you do stay above kind of that recent high there. If you want to take that recent impulse as your target, you can look at some breakout targets around 37 to 38. Flex, we're not really watching anymore. Walmart bounced right off that bull div that we called out. I told you guys above 145, you should be able to get 148. There's your 148 target. Next target would be 149 and a quarter to 150. Final target being 153.66. As long as you stay above 145, you should be able to break into those levels. Target, I told you guys above 170, you should get 179. That target was hit. 182 target was hit. Next targets were 191 to 194. Both those targets were hit, leaving you with your final target at 205 if you do stay above 194. Okay. CIIC, I do like this little pullback here. If you do start to push higher, probably above like 30, you could start to push into 35, 37. Keep an eye on that. ULTA, I had a, where's my chart on this one? I had a target of 299 on ULTA. You did have a breakout into 298, and then it topped out a little bit. This still looks really strong. You can look at like the 1 hour. You're still continuing to be bought on the dips. I think if you stay above 290, you should be able to get that 299 as your target. Moving on to Disney. I think Disney above 181, you should get 186 to 188. So watch out for that. American Eagle did hit our targets. Where is my chart on that? Yeah, right here. You had a target around 2260, 2270. Both those targets were hit. You are pulling back to retest your support. So as long as you stay above this support, you should be able to get those targets again. And then your farther out breakout targets would be 23. Jeffries, same thing. We had a trade here on Jeffries for a breakout of this massive distribution. We did hit our target on that, which was 26 and a quarter. There was basically no drawdown on this trade, so beautiful trade there. Siri, I was in a Siri trade. I went ahead and closed that. You can see we got stopped out on Siri. It looked really good for a while, and then you just had a nasty sell-off on Friday. So we went ahead and closed that trade. I'm no longer watching Siri anymore. Cloud is still holding support as long as you stay above 27 and a quarter. You should be able to get back into that 29 and a quarter to $30 range. You hold above 30. Long term, I'd be watching 32. MVIS, I believe I had a chart on this. Here we go. So MVIS had a beautiful falling wedge on the 1 hour. We are still playing out of that falling wedge. I'd be a little careful on this. You do have a little bit of resistance around December's VWAP and that pivot holding you down. This could send you back down into this pivot here, or even worse, send you back down into retest that wedge. I think the pivot should hold because this retest would not really be a retest at this point because it's so far away from the wedge. But if we do break above, say, 609, you should be able to push higher into that pivot or that gap fill around 850. Airbnb, basically the same story. Falling wedge, breaking out. You could retest the pivot, but it does look really good to continue higher currently. Your target on that would probably be around 160. Home Depot, I really liked Home Depot because of the retest of this little support here. If you do get back above this nasty little downtrend here, you should be able to break higher into, I'd say, like 280. Lemonade was seeing a massive breakout here. Not really much left on this trade. You had a small little distribution here with that triangle, broke out, hit all of our targets, final target being 173. So watch that 173 target to be hit probably on Monday or Tuesday. DoorDash also looking really good. I did go ahead and close this for a nice profit. It was a nasty sell-off on Friday, which did get sold off once again on Monday open. So I went ahead and sold that around 153. Really good trade. Our average was around like 140. So we had a really nice gain on shares there. I think if you do stay above 158, you should be able to get 165, 172. Crispr, I'm watching for a pullback. If it pulls back towards like 170, 160, I'll probably start to pick up some shares on that. Cert is another one that I'm watching for a short-term pullback. If you do pull back to retest, probably around 34, yeah, anywhere around 34 to 35 would be a nice little pullback. It's very bullish here. You bounce off that 1 hour pivot. Your main target would be that pivot around 39. ACI, we went ahead and took a trade on this beautiful retest of this inverse head and shoulders neckline. You do have earnings coming up. I typically do not play earnings, but this chart was just too good not to trade. So we went ahead and bought some options on this. Watching for that bounce, so keep an eye on that. Snapchat, we are still holding our premium on Snapchat. I tried to put in an order to close that for around an 80% profit, but it did not get filled. We should get filled on Monday due to the weekend theta. As long as this stays above like 48, we make max profit. All of our other plays, not much to talk about. They're still just playing out. We're in a bunch of share plays. We're just waiting on these to find support. SmileDirect was one thing I wanted to mention here. As long as this stays above this weekly trend, we should be breaking this pivot and then soaring into 16 or 18. So watch this weekly chart here. Very clean long-term chart. All right, let's get into big tech and then we'll call it a video. So above 218, you should be able to get 221, 222. You're still holding. You break this triangle. You shouldn't fake out again because you already faked out here. So break this triangle again. 232 would be your final target. Watching Apple, I told you guys above 125, 128, still strong support. You should be able to get 132, 136. 132 has been hit, so watch your 136 target. Facebook, same thing. I told you guys above 265. You should be able to retest that 277 level. That has been a massive resistance, so watch for that level to break. If it does not break, you'll probably consolidate all the way up into earnings. Netflix above 510 should be strong. Once again, though, you do have earnings, so I would be careful on this chart here. Above 510, you should be able to get 525, also 542. You did just create a new gap on Netflix, which has been pretty much filled, but understand that Netflix fills almost every single gap. So that should be your main target moving forward around 520. Amazon is still playing out this trade very close to invalidation. Same thing with this. You do have earnings coming up above 32. I think you still get 33 to 34. Tesla has just been a monster of a trade. We have not changed this chart really much in the past 2 months. All of our targets have been smashed. You did just hit our final target. I told you guys above 783, you should be able to get 839. That target has been smashed. I can't really extend this very much on the daily, but we can go ahead. Let's grab the most recent impulse, which would be this leg here, all the way up into where it started gapping. And we can see that we're currently hitting our second breakout targets, giving us a final target of 961, short-term target around 896. Okay, so watch those two levels. It really should not continue higher without pulling back. It's already gapped up like 4 days in a row. So watch for a pullback to fill at least the most local gap around 820. And then that would be some very strong support. Okay, that is the summary markets. That is our options watch list. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. One last thing, guys. I am running a small promotion on Twitter. If you guys DM me ready to learn, the first 5 people will get a discount for our Discord membership. So check that out on Twitter, and I will see you guys in Discord tomorrow. Peace out, guys.